Reality, as Eileen Robertson Hamra perceived it, instantaneously altered the moment authorities confirmed that the plane her husband was piloting had crashed and he had not survived. In the process of mourning her loss, with 3 young children in tow, where Eileen wandered and landed was nothing short of miraculous. Between the valleys of grief and the peaks of hope, she discovered that keeping promises to those that have left this world is a lifelong act, and honoring one love does not mean foregoing the freedom and joy that is found in reopening your heart, trusting in new love, and expanding your definition of family. Her book, Time to Fly, shares her story, her insights, and more. Welcome, Eileen Robertson Hamra, to Clutching Our Pearls.
Today we are talking to Eileen Robertson Hamra about the stigmas of grief and dating. Thanks for your opinion, but you don't really get to have one. People have a lot of opinions, especially when it comes from a place of love. Eileen Robertson Hamra is the author of Simon and Schuster's published Time to Fly, is joining us right now to talk about the ins and the outs and getting through to the next day and eventually back to life. Marie and Eileen are 2 women who have loved, lost, and been given the grace to not hold themselves to perfection, but to get through grief with as much grace as they could find. Today, they both share their stories on stages across the country in an effort to ensure that no person thinks they're going through grief the wrong way.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Susie. Eileen has been a client and a friend for, I think, since the minute we met. We were introduced by, this is going to be your new best friend. And it has certainly been a really wonderful connection for me. Eileen is a lifestyle and business coach. She's an author, she's an educator, she's an inspirational speaker, and she's also the CEO of Fit Together LLC, which is a company that is committed to enabling women and families to live healthy and balanced lives through coaching and education. She's also a founding partner of Evolution Workforce, a unique corporate wellness company that's really focused on improving their bottom line by lowering healthcare costs, increasing productivity, which as a business owner, we totally dig, and reducing absenteeism while improving the morale of the folks that are there and giving them some job satisfaction. Like, oh, hey, you're valued. Welcome to the crew. As a certified health coach and educator, she's received her training at the Institute of Integrative Nutrition in New York City, and she's also got her BS in Management Science at Virginia Tech and her MBA from Case Western Reserve University. The lady's got
the long bio.
I'm saying she's got street cred and she's got creds. That's where Eileen comes from. Today, Eileen is an incredible part of the fabric of Chicago and Minnesota.
Missouri.
I was so close.
Missouri. You were so close. The other M. No, there's many M states.
The other M in this world.
Yeah. Missouri.
With her incredible family and 4 children. And I've seen her exist in this world for the better part of 3 years now, I think. And everything I see her do is an effort to enhance others that have had similar experiences and to encourage people to live healthier lives and to live extraordinary lives, no matter what the circumstance. I'm really blessed to have you on the podcast today. We've gone through so many similar experiences, and I want to give you a moment to just let the audience in on how you came through your experience and how you got to where you are today.
Great. Yeah. So that's a big question. So I think the experience you're referring to is losing my husband. So I, in December 2011, 3 days before Christmas, my husband, Brian Robertson, died in a plane crash. And my life as I knew it, everything, my identity, everything I counted on was gone in an instant. And yeah, I mean, how I got through it was a lot of human beings coming into my life, a lot of soul searching, a lot of like really internal transformation. And I wrote a whole book, which I'm not going to tell you, to really serve others, which is how I met Marie. Because once the book was ready to come out, I was like, oh, I need actually help sharing the story. And I met someone who knew Marie and knew me, and he was like, this is the person you're supposed to do this with. And I was like, well, what better human being to help me sort of launch my personal brand and help me launch my book from a marketing perspective than Marie Hill. So yeah, I could say a lot, but I'm sure you have something specific we want to dive into. I don't, yeah.
Well, and it's always hard when we're doing this in podcast form, because you and I have had so many soul conversations about what it is to lose the love of your life and what it is to be graciously grieving and to have little tiny humans that you're bringing through that process. And then there comes the opinions of other people, which are delightful in so many ways. And one of the pieces of grace that you gave me is that you pushed me into a space where it was not okay for anyone else to tell me how to grieve.
Yeah.
And when I met you, I was a little fresher into grief than you were.
I had a couple more years under my belt. Yeah.
But it was still, I mean, those are still emotional experiences that I think we as women share, not more frequently, but at leed easier than some of our male counterparts. And one of the things that I've tried to shout from the rooftops since the pandemic hit is that the pandemic pushed everyone into grief.
Yes, some form of grief for sure.
Right? You were either grieving somebody that you lost, you were grieving the life that you knew.
Yep.
Or it was
your expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, 2020 is going to be great. I'm going to launch a book in April.
Yeah, right. Well, and I think, for a lot of us, it pushed us into the unknown. Something, we just didn't know. And that is what grief is. Like, when I lost Brian, it was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know who I am. I'm like, if I'm not Mrs. Brian Robertson, who am I? Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to be okay? All of the like unknown. And when the pandemic hit, it was like, oh my God, are we all going to die? Or like, is the financial markets going to completely crash? I mean, it was like, holy shit, what we didn't know. And that it's a very scary, well, I was about to say opportunity because that is actually how I view things, but it's an opportunity, but none of us asked for that one. As we didn't.
For me, it felt like everything was in free fall, emotionally, financially, economic, like everything was just free falling, and it was a complete unknown. How long were you? How long did you know Brian before he passed? How long was he in your life?
So 14 years. We were married almost 11 years to the day that he died. So, and we had 3 young children, Melanie, Brooke, and Max, and they were 8, 7, and 4 at the time that Brian passed. So, yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. a lot is a soft way to say it.
Yeah. I wanted to share something really fast because I was actually really blessed by something my dad said actually in the funeral home, because when I saw Brian's body, this maybe is too fast, whatever, like of a story, but like I wasn't breathing, and I wasn't I was like, oh my God, I can't even believe I'm doing this. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a yoga teacher. So I'm like, you are not breathing. You need to start breathing. And it's like, and I started breathing, and I walked up, and I was like, oh my God, Brian is at peace. Like his spirit has been released. And I felt this huge relief about the peace that I saw in him. And I was like, oh my God, he's okay. I'm going to be okay. We are going to be okay. And then I turned around, and my dad and parents were standing there, but my dad was standing there, and I was like, oh my God, Dad, I'm okay. And I don't know if I should be okay. And he said to me, he's like, Eileen, there is no right way to grieve. When you're okay, be okay. When you're sad, be sad. When you're happy, be happy. Like, don't try to be something that you're not. And that, I have to say, like, really, I think about that all the time. It's like it kind of set the stage for me to be where I was, or at least return to where I was, and not try to, be something I'm not. In that moment, I was okay. There were many moments after that I was definitely not, but that moment I was, okay. So I wanted to share that.
And like, what a gift it is to not should all over yourself, right?
Yes.
Because there are so many shoulds that go with grief and go with loss. And I think in my experience, because even though I had been Jim's best friend and cohort and partner for 10 years, the 3 years that we were together, we didn't get married. We were just at the precipice. And so when that loss happened, nobody really knew not only how to deal with me, but I'm also left with, we had just started a family business. 7 months later, he was gone. And I had to figure out how to grieve on brand and grieve in a way that wouldn't diminish people's confidence in our ability to deliver what we had sold. I mean, it was like the complexities just like started getting so gnarly. And I was like, good grief. I only had 3 weeks to figure out exactly how I was going to show up in the world.
Yeah, that's not a lot of time. Most people are still like laying on the couch. I mean, like, yeah, much less showing up in the world. Yeah. I'm lucky I didn't have to pivot that quickly, but in a public way. But yeah, that's a lot. And that happens for people. Like, yeah. Yeah.
And I think, as we're seeing the world change as swiftly as we're seeing it change, there's a lot of people that are experiencing I don't have time to rest on my laurels or my grief. It's not a possibility for me to stay in a space where I'm not producing. And the weight of that is so intense. And it comes with so many expectations. And so I want to talk for a minute about the expectations of grief, because good grief, most of them are stupid and they suck. So
they're very prescribed to your roles. Because you were almost married, you didn't fit in the right grief bucket.
What grief bucket yeah.
Exactly. It's like I have these box that I'm society right now that I expect from you now that you've experienced this loss. And because you're here on the org chart, you should be functioning and perceived in this way. I mean, from what I've heard from you both, it's like there was your process and then there was your reaction to society's process. So
yeah, and what's really interesting too is like people's expectations of how you should be and what you should look like, and yeah, that was really, yeah, there was a lot of expectations. And, I didn't show, well, first of all, I had this like revelation, not revelation, but I remember like, being in pain on the couch. And I was like, actually, I think I was laying in my bed and I was like miserable. And I was like, oh my God, I need help. I need to reach out. I need to get help. And I need to figure out what's next. Like I've got to create what's next because everything that I had planned was now not going to happen. And I cannot live on the bed on the couch because that seems like an awful, awful life. If I am just like, I'm like, whoa. So I got support, but I also, and I didn't necessarily do this intentionally or not intentionally, but I wasn't a big outward like crier. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't like, I'm no, like I wasn't even some of my inner circle. There was a couple people that got it all.
Yeah.
My sister being one of it, like every day, multiple times a day, you know, and a couple of my close girlfriends that were local in my space, but I wasn't calling up everyone on the phone, family, extended family, and like crying. And they were like, well, then she mustn't be grieving, or she's not grieving the right way. Or I was like, I'm not like, if people don't know, right? Like, we don't know what the other person's doing if you're not asking them, if you're not in conversation with them. So, yeah, there was a lot of that dynamic that I had to kind of navigate.
And so on the flip side, I had to be in the moment and be in the business we created.
Yeah.
And so I literally built into my employee manual that tears are okay. And if you're uncomfortable with it, it's all right for you to walk out, but it's going to happen. And if you're not okay with it, this probably isn't the fit for you. But I also
I think you should have that. You had that in your client thing too, because I think the first time we met, we cried. Yeah.
Because like, listen, like the more you can step into your reality and just be like, listen, this is where I'm at. If you're not cool with it, then it's not a good time for us to be connected. And that's okay. That is absolutely okay. Because if I have to sit here and swallow who I am or what's happening, I'm going to break as a human. And I'm not really going to be the best partner, service provider, whatever it is I need to be for you. And I think that, as we go through the process of just even processing emotion of trauma or whatever's happening in our lives, the more we can pre-frame what's happening, and this is going to get into my neuro-linguistic programming woo-woo, but like if you pre-frame for people that, listen, there's going to be times when emotions are going to hit me and I'm going to cry, and I'm more than happy to pick it up and take it outside. But if I love you enough to cry, know that I love you enough to go all the way for where we're going in this relationship, in this business, in this partnership. And that's a pretty vulnerable place to be.
Yeah. Brave.
What gifts has learning to be vulnerable given to you?
Yeah, I would say being vulnerable will love, honestly. I think that's one of those, I honestly, I loved before I lost Brian, obviously, but I had barriers. I had, I wasn't vulnerable. And I'm sure there's still 100 layers left, right? So I'm like, oh, I'm so vulnerable and I love, love, love all the time. No. But if I think of, December 21 of 2011 and December 23, right? Like in that moment, sometimes they call it a crucible moment. It's like the ability to love and be loved has completely expanded for me. I often share about like, I did not know. Like, it's kind of an effed up scenario, but it's like the amount of love that came flowing at me in the days after Brian passed, and the whole family, really, not just me, but a lot of it, like my friends, my family, Brian's friends. I mean, it was like so many people loving, and that's what I was present to. Um, and I was like, wow, had I not experienced this trauma, I would also not be experiencing this immense love. And I'm cool to never experience trauma like that again. Thank you very much, anyone who might in the universe who might be listening. But really, like, and I think sometimes, and I'll shut up in a second, but like for me, it's about being able to be with people, right? Because it's like, to your point of like, I might cry in front of you, like that for me would have made me very uncomfortable, but like now I can just be with people. Like I can, not always, not all the time, don't get me wrong, don't get this twisted. I am not a perfect human, but when I have the capacity, I do have the capacity, right? An expanded capacity to be with people, listen to people, have compassion for people, not judge people, in the same way that I did not have that capacity. Yeah. So,
and if you're able to really process your trauma and heal with it, your capacity for compassion and empathy just grow. If you shut down the trauma and don't look it in the eye, it does not come. Marie, I'm sorry, you were saying? It does not come.
If it worked, fine, shut it off. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. And then you just have to deal with it later. And it might get worse and twisted. And yeah.
Oh yeah.
Not worth it.
She knows exponents.
Yeah. That's a really great way to put it.
And I think, as two women that have experienced what we have, and I know that Susie has also experienced loss and trauma that has been life-shaking. There's a few ways that we can react. We can try to embrace and grow. We can ask our cute fellas to bring us a beer. We can also just kind of implode on ourselves and listen to what everybody else thinks we should be doing and use that as a measure. And I know in my experience, especially with being not married yet, even though we had been partners for so long, I had the wildly undesirable experience of having his mother tell me that he probably didn't love me enough and that he was probably going to leave me eventually and that I shouldn't grieve him because he wasn't as good of a person as I thought he was. And she did this in the middle of my workday at the cafe next door because I had remembered that Jim told me to never, ever let her into my space and to never speak to her because she was the venom in his life. And when she took me and told me that I was unloved by him, that I was giving him undeserved grief, and that my feelings were inappropriate, which, fuck everything. I know who that man was, and I know why I loved him and how I loved him and what was so incredible about it. In that moment, as I was shredding, I thought about the other people that have much more silent saboteurs, much more insidious and quiet expectations of who they should be and how they should be and what it's like to go through change, grief, whether it's divorce or death or even figuring out after the pandemic that your business doesn't work the way you thought it did. those are all things that just get ripped away from you and change your reality without your permission. And they're terrifying. And they're more terrifying when you go through them alone. So if you were to look at grief and loss through that filter of having a tribe, having a base to go through it with, or trying to figure it out solo, what would your advice be to the person that is just starting out on that path and not sure of where they are?
Yeah. I wanted to, so I'll comment on that, but one of the things I was thinking about while you were sharing that story is that I think one of the things we think we can count on are the things that are like societal, expectations are like the inner circles, right? Like your immediate family, your best friends, the family, right? Like, and all those circles are going to do the right thing, which is kind of, and when they don't, it's like 100 times more upsetting, right? Because it's like, well, if some stranger, like you're pumping gas and some jerk said that to you, you'd be like, whatever. But the fact, like you wouldn't even, it wouldn't hurt. You wouldn't have this, it wouldn't have the same impact. But when it is someone that you care about their opinion, that's when it hurts. And that's when the expectation, and it's really about expectations, right? Because we have an expectation, societal expectation, that we bought into, and that like, those people won't hurt you, or that she would have Jim's best interest and your best interest at heart. And I don't know her. I'm not going to say anything about that, but it's like, I think the capacity of where she is in her capacity, or others are in their capacity, that's where they are. And you're not going to change it, and you're not going to change them, and you're not going to get them to see your side necessarily. Maybe they'll grow, but that is really important to just create that boundary. It's like, okay, got it. That's where you are. And that has nothing to do with me.
Yeah,
like nothing to do with me.
Business.
Yeah, it's none of your business. And it's actually not, it's like when it's so asinine or so, removed, you're like, oh, but when it gets a little close, you're like, oh, but no, remember like who you are, remember the relationship that you had, and then hold that dear. And anyone who's like interfering either obnoxiously or subversively, create that, create a boundary. I say this actually in my book. It's like having compassion for that person or that group. It's like, hey, that's where they are. And that, like, imagine the shitty world that they live in, that's their perspective. Please find peace, find love for yourself. And I don't need to interact either, right? It's like, you can have compassion, you can love, and you can never talk to that person ever again. Because you can forgive and they don't even need to know about it, right? Like, yeah. But I think it is important. Yeah, none of their business. But for yourself, this is the thing. It's like for yourself, that little metaphor or whatever. I don't know. It's like some story where like holding on to coal, black coal, right? Like, and the thing, you're only hurting yourself by holding on to those things. So drop it, and let it go, because it's not about you. It's not reality. And then look in, right? See where you are, and then surround yourself with people that like see the best in you.
Or have basic fucking decency. Just,
Well,
yeah, that too. I mean, that's one way to put it, for sure.
Well, and I think, Eileen, like that's part of one of the biggest blessings that I've had in my life is in knowing you and having someone to show me that it's okay to love people where they are.
Yeah.
And it's not your responsibility to grow them up.
No, it's not.
But we're all coming from our own perspectives, and we're all coming from our own experiences. And none of us have made it through this life
Not yet.
with
No.
unskinned knees. And, you know, like today, my Lily looks at me, and, you know, she's 9 now. She was 5 when Jim died. And she looked at me and she said, "Mom, I'm going to die." And I was like, yeah, you are. None of us are making it out of this alive.
Nope.
But you're not going to die for a long time, baby. You just have a cold. Inside my head, I was like, don't act like a dude. It's just a cold. Seriously, you're not dying.
You're not dying. Well, and I think, unfortunately for her, though, but like, I know you have compassion, and it's sort of a joke, but it's like, it is like, I mean, cold, COVID, death. It's like,
Yeah.
it is so, yeah, just to speak to the trauma of the day, like we do. Like every time someone sneezes, you're like, you got COVID? Are you going to die? Like, yeah, because there are people that do. And
have you contained your droplets?
Right.
And I think that like that's kind of the note that is so poignant about this conversation is we're all in a space of fear and trauma. And whether we've lost someone or not, the perception of loss is so imprinted on humanity at this point that whether you are someone that has experienced losing at the level that Eileen and I have, or you're a 9-year-old kid that is watching the news or just hearing it from the side, that every cold and sniffle is a possibility of death. We've got to have some serious grace and grounding. And things are going to look much different from here on out. Yeah. If we can think each other, there's so much progress to be made.
Yeah. And I definitely think one of the reasons I wrote the book, but and you, me, whatever, speaking about it, is to change the narrative around death and grief. And what, you know, like all this is, it's like, it's almost like we're all going there 6 feet under or spread in the sea. Like none of us are escaping. It's happened to everyone before us. It's going to happen to everyone, including, I mean, it's like, why are we so afraid? Why are we so afraid? Like, because we don't know, right? Back to the beginning of the conversation, we don't know. Like, there's a lot of religion, there's a lot of story, there's a lot of trying to figure it all out. But the reality is, you can have all the faith in the world, and it's faith, right? Because we don't know. It hasn't happened in our human experience yet. And yet, it's like, okay, so if that's so, right, then like, what is this for, right? Like, what is this human experience for? What is life for? And be there and enjoy that, because that's all you actually know about is what's happening right now. So this whole present. Like, precisely, right? Like, not like, you know, fuck the past and, oh, I'm carefree about the future. Like, considering both ends, but really all we have is right now. And so and start inquiring into some of these crazy things that we think and believe and drive us nuts and have us go crazy and get us reactivated. And it's kind of silly, you know, when you're in it, it doesn't feel silly, it feels all very real. But like, if you think about it, it's, you know, wow, we spend a lot of energy on shit that we cannot control. Right. So anyway,
I think, you know, just to round this out, that's everybody's biggest fear is the things that we can't control.
Yeah.
We can't control death. We can't control the world like we thought we used to a couple of years ago, you know, before we got tossed to the side. So if you're going to be in control of something, the only thing you can control is your reaction. and compassion, empathy,
Boundaries.
boundaries. Oh, beautiful boundaries. Like those are the things that really matter. And Eileen, I really want to thank you for being here with us today. I know that I, as just a human in your ether, have grown from the way that you share your story and the way that you push towards a perspective of you don't get to judge grief. You don't get to judge pain. That person's perception is their reality.
Yes.
And
whether we like it or not.
right? You don't get to have an opinion. It's theirs. And
yes,
if we come out of this conversation with one nugget of blessing that can span the folks that have lost and those that have not, what's the one piece that you really want people to take away?
the one nugget. Okay, let me look. Well, when you were just sharing, this is what I was present to, was my children's journey, and like it is different than mine. And as their parent, I want them to be happy, and they're not always happy. And so I guess it is a reiteration of that, like everybody's journey is their journey. And even if you think you have influence over it, which I think as a mother I should, or isn't that something you're born with, like the ability to control your children? No, actually you're not. Yeah, I learned that one the hard way. But to allow others, whether both, like either allow others to experience their own grief the way they need to experience the grief, even if you don't like it, it doesn't make any sense to you, you can see all the reasons why they shouldn't be that way, they don't see that, and hold space for them and love them, and vice versa, right? It's like just allow people to be where they are, because that's what works.
Let go of the scripts and just be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, allowing yourself to just be too and shake everybody else's perception about where you should or could be, because at the end of the day, they're not in your high heels. I mean, granted,
or wearing your pearls.
I was going to say, I mean, you're 6.5 feet tall, so we don't wear the same heels, but.
No, we don't.
You are? That's amazing.
No, I know I'm not. In heels I can be, though. I'm like 5'9", so if I wear some big heels, I'm well over 6 foot. Yeah, and
I used to be a still walker, but that's the best I can do.
That's the best you can do.
I think no matter where we are in our journey, there's got to be space for us to love ourselves and love each other.
Yeah.
Susie, is there anything else?
Yeah. I'm just going to stop the ending right now and reboot, because Eileen, I want to know the story of your book. How did you get from loss to book? Like
loss to book?
From your loss to your book, and what is the intention you have with that book? Like what do you want people to get out of it? Or what drove you to write it? I'm going to ask you 30 questions in a row.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, they're all similar. Yeah. So, so what drove me to write it was, when I was experiencing grief, there were a lot of kind of woo-woo weird sort of moments that happened, and signs, and it was kind of very spiritual. And I would tell people that at the beginning, during the first like 6 months to a year, and people were like, oh my God, you got to write a book. And I heard it enough times that I was like, okay, I'm going to write a book. And so I started, the year after he passed, and I wrote down stories and all that. And then I was like, why the hell am I writing a book? I'm not a writer. I'm like, I've never dreamed of writing a book. I have like a management science degree and like MBA in finance, like numbers, spreadsheets, way more my speed. And then, but then I said I would, which is often the only thing that keeps me honest. I said I would, so I do. Sometimes it takes me a long time. But so anyway, this took me a long, long time. And I was like, why am I writing? Am I writing like like I definitely did not want to write a how-to grief book, because I'm clear that I do not know. And the way, I knew my way, but not the way. And then fast forward 7 years, and I found my now love and now husband, I call him, Mike. And I was pregnant with my son, who is now 4. And I was like, oh my God, this is the whole story. I was like, this is the story that people need to hear. It's like from, December 22nd, 2011, worst day, shortest day of the year and the worst day of my life, to June 21st, 2021. No, not, oh my God, 2017, the day Zach was born. And what I could never have imagined, never thought that was possible, didn't even want that. And could never have imagined what my life could be like or look like in the future, filled with love and expansion and all of that. And I was like, I need to share this. And how did I go from there to here? So that's how that happened. Yeah. And I was like, well, if this helps one person, I'll be happy. And if it helped a lot, then, great. So here I am sharing. Yeah.
Well, I can say that you've helped at least one person, but I know that there are so many more that have been influenced by your story and your family and the philanthropy and the effort that you put into the world to make it a better place and to share just simply your perspective without judgment. And that's a really hard thing to do, Eileen. It's really friggin' hard because there are always going to be people that push back. There are always going to be people that think that you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
But they
That's
don't
their problem, not mine. That's their problem, not mine. Yeah.
You don't need to invest
And
in
then
their
there are the people
bullshit.
that you should listen to. Yeah, well, and also, but there sometimes I think the things that catch me and get me like hooked are the things that like I'm like, ooh, I really do view that life this way. It's like if I'm really hooked, I'm like, ooh, there's a good nugget for me to grow. It's like this is kind of crazy, and it's a practice because it's not easy, but like there's times where I'm like, lean into that. It's kind of the same thing as trauma. It's like, lean into that hook. Lean into, why are you so pissed off, Eileen? Why do you want to rip that person's head off? That is my opportunity to grow. And it is not comfortable. And sometimes it takes me days and weeks to like get to that place where I can forgive, and like I'll forgive for like a second, and I'll go, I hate them again, and I'll forgive for like a second. I'm like, but especially if I'm really hooked. But that's how I kind of like, that's what I do. That's how I grow. That's what I choose. I don't have to do that. But it doesn't work for me because I'm like, I suffer when I hate others, actually. The reality is. So like I like got to figure out how to not do that.
I think everybody does. And I think when you're in a space of holding other people's pain and holding unnecessary weight for what's happened before, you've got to carry
exhausting.
And I don't know about anybody else, but I am tired most of the time. I am carrying around a lot to begin with. And I don't have space to carry around your crap too.
Right.
You want that? You get to carry it. Mazel. enjoy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially in the space that we've been in together and in the journeys that we've shared. There are so many more blessings in looking pain and fear in the eye, finding out why it's showing up, and if it's trying to protect you, and if it's still valuable to you. And that's a lot of like neuro-linguistic programming talk, but like, you know, if you're showing up and making me push people away, or I'm taking advice from people that don't actually love me the way I want to be loved, what's here that's serving me? And do I still want it?
Yeah.
And if go burn some sage, burn some shit, throw it in a fire, I don't care. But let it go.
Cleanse. Yeah. Let it go.
Cleanse thyself.
And you said, you got to Left Eye Lopez that, because we got to put it up in flames.
Oh, Left Eye did a good job. She did a very good job. Put everything in his car and set it on fire, because that's how we're going out.
So how was it for you two individually when dating and romance came back into your life? What was that? How did that feel?
Eileen,
how did people react?
Super fun. Okay, like I described it initially like I felt like I was in middle school. I was so excited, and then because I was like, I mean, because I hadn't dated anyone or been with anyone or anything for 14 years, actually at that point, like 15, 16 years. I mean, that's a long time to like not have someone new in your life, right? So there's all this excitement and all of that. And then it was like all the judgment, right? Like, and I had children. Like I was like, when I met Mike, I was, we met and we were dating, and for a while we didn't introduce them to I didn't introduce them to the kids because I was like, I just didn't personally, no judgment, you do you. But for me, I was like, wasn't too long because I was like, listen, this is not my real life. When like we'd go to San Francisco, we'd go to clubs. I was like, I haven't been to a club in for how long? And I was like, when I'm
really imagine you clubbing, and it's
I know it was fun. And I go, and by the way, when I go home, I like do the soccer. I'm a dance mom. I'm not like that kind of dance mom, but I'm a dance mom, soccer mom. I mean, like a little wrestling matches into wrestling at the time. I was like, that's how I spend all my weekends. It is not at a club. It's not at a fancy restaurant. It is not drinking wine till 3:00 in the morning. But this is a lot of fun. So it was a lot of fun. And but then once I wanted to introduce the kids, because I was like, okay, this is more than fun. I really think I like this guy. Yeah, and then it was a whole, I mean, there's a whole world there. I don't know how much time we have, but we don't have it much more time, I don't think. But yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot.
It's a lot. And I
think
think
you to like join a grief convent. Like
oh God. Well, yeah, there's a lot of yeah, I mean, that was it's funny when he first died, I actually kind of thought that I didn't actually, it kind of like shuts your system down. Grief will shut your libido down. Like it just shuts everything down. And I actually really did believe for a short period of time that I would be fine. I was 41 and I would be fine. I thought I would be fine to be alone for the rest of my life. And that I would have a spiritual marriage with, I laugh a little bit now because it was really, it's kind of funny, but it really wasn't funny at the time. I was like, yeah, I see this, I want this. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. It was probably like 9-10 months later. And I think I was like, I don't know, like saw some cute guy in a magazine. I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, I feel something. I'm like, I don't think I could be celibate for the rest of my life. And yeah, that's how,
but
that's
like,
when I started thinking, at least.
There is still that expectation out there though, that, once you've had the love of your life, that you just shut down. And I think one of the stories that always comes up for me is Jim was a huge Humphrey Bogart fan. And so Bogey and Bacall, like we had a gold framed picture above our bed. And, you know, she said once he passed that he was the love of her life. And even though she loved again and loved intensely, that it was okay to let him be that and to move into her next relationship. And so, and I still have that picture hanging in my home because it brings me back to, you can have the love of your life and you can have a life afterwards.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm in the phase right now where I've reconnected with an old love. I kissed him for the first time 19 years ago. He's
Love
just
that.
now as he was then. But for me, it was important because I have a daughter. And for me to let somebody into my daughter's space, I couldn't imagine vetting somebody I didn't know. And about 2 months ago, I watched my daughter run up to him and hug him for the first time. And the look on his face was absolutely the most priceless moment. Like it's going to go down in my heart analog of what was really important to me in this world, is to show that little person that yes, we are lovable. Yes, we are worthy. And yes, there are people out there that we can trust.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going to say. I have chills.
And yes,
Every
life is,
time.
but it's okay. It's okay. There is another side of loss. And the other side of loss is love.
And love
Yeah.
isn't finite.
No.
No, there's not a limited amount. And I do think it takes a special human to come into a life of a widow. Absolutely. Because, you know, Brian, see, I even sometimes say, I mean, he's been gone for 10 years almost, and I still will, like, you know, mix names sometimes when I'm sharing a story, but I was like, but you know, even he would even agree in the beginning. And I completely it's part of the book, but I'm like, and tell the story, like, I believe completely that Brian set us up. There were signs, it was clear, and Mike saw it. So so I was like, there's actually like 3 of us in this relationship, because Brian's not, although he's not walking the earth, and obviously there's no romantic piece left because he's not here, but I'm like, he's going to be a part of my life forever, you know, just as you will be a part of my life forever. But that person has to be able to, it takes a strong, confident, amazing human being. And we're very lucky, Marie, that we have found 2 amazing, strong men that, or humans, just to come in and love us. And, you know, Michael say, he's like, I'm grateful to Brian. He's like, he had these great children that now I get to be their stepdad too. And that's like, that's amazing. And that's not something, and this is part of why we're sharing this, but like, that did not seem possible to me when he died. I was like, no way. Brian was amazing. First of all, I cannot get lucky twice. That's how I felt. I was like, I was so lucky to have met Brian. I'm like, nah, not me, not again. I'm a bitch. Like, no way. Yeah, like no way. Like, it wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be fair to my single girlfriends. Like, and I got lucky twice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, you know, just to tag on to that, to be able to find the space inside yourself to give yourself the grace of, it's okay that I love. It's okay that I grow again. And for those of us that have kids, to give them a place to anchor that is safe, for as much safety as we can ever provide, because we know that we ain't in charge of shit.
Yeah.
I think there's so many people in the world that need to hear that message, that it's okay to reach out and love again, and that it's okay to let your kids love again. because that had to be the most terrifying part for me. I know
Yeah.
I broke. I know she broke. I could break again. I couldn't do that to her. But the faith that we get to have in love and healing
Yeah.
is what is going to keep this world moving. So, Eileen, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. Clutching Our Pearls is all about living on the edge and understanding how all of us walk through this life. Because I don't think any of us think that we have the right footing or that we all have the answer. But every now and then, we get to be in our skin and share stories that help each other through to the other side. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast, for loving the podcast, and for walking on the razor's edge. Because at the end of the day, sometimes that's all we have.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Susie.
I'm so happy to have met you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.